Welcome back to All Kings Considered. I'm Dan Casey, and once again, we're here with the best roast that Westeros has to offer with our weekly breakdown of House of the Dragon. Episode 8, titled Lord of the Tides, gave us poorly advised petitions, a deeply uncomfortable dinner party, and a whole bunch of people who couldn't hold their tongues. But before we get to the rest of the episode, let me introduce this week's small council. First up, she is an actress, a host, a dungeon master extraordinaire, and a musician. Her new album, Behold Her Dreams, is available now wherever fine music is streamed. Please welcome back once again, Amy Vorpahl.
Hi! So happy to be here. Hello.
I'm so happy that you're here. We have so much to talk about, but first, I gotta know. I feel like I could see you in a court politics setting with some sort of petty grievance to air before the king. What would your petty grievance be? And that's it's not a diss. I just feel like, I feel like you could present your case well.
My case would definitely be that I don't get enough credit for doing my laundry. I need some pomp and circumstance around this. It's a very fine and adult thing that I get done, and there is no one to witness it. And I absolutely hate that. It is wrong. It is unjust.
You know, I agree, especially because just when you finally cleaned your clothes, you have to then fold them like some sort of magical clothing wizard.
Yes.
But no, I agree. And also in King's Landing, people are pretty filthy on a general basis. So that would be worthy of accolade, I think. I recently had to buy a washing machine for the first time in my life, washer and dryer. Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, this is not a fun purchase. But the dryer, when it's done, plays a little jaunty tune. So that's sort of the recognition that I feel like you might be missing. So maybe just get like one of those old hit clips. You remember those? Like have it play 7 seconds of a Backstreet Boys song rigged to when your dryer finishes. So then you two can get that not at all worth it dose of serotonin that my dryer now gives me.
I love that solution. Thank you.
Look, I'm all about low-tech solutions to high-tech problems. Anyway, let's move on a bit. We have another episode expert joining us. Once again, it's Nerdist staff writer, our resident lore master, and someone whose succession is unimpeachable. It's Michael Walsh.
Hi, Dan. Hi, Amy. Glad to be back.
Mikey, how are you doing? Does this episode make you want to sign up for the Citadel's HMO plan? Because it looks pretty robust.
You know, I haven't been feeling very well lately, so I went to see a maester, and he said I'm dead. So
wow.
Then I went to an actual doctor, and he said, "What do you mean you saw a maester? They're not real." And he diagnosed me with talking to guys who wear robes. So I don't know. I got some decisions I got to make. I really got to look in the mirror.
Look, we've all been robo-tripping after watching House of the Dragon. Things happen. I get it, but I'm glad you saw an actual medical professional and not some weird leech guy at the local spa.
I still saw the leech guy, but
okay. Well, you know what? You really should be changing your blood at least twice a year. New studies have shown, based on some light Googling that I personally have done. So we'll just leave it with that. Elizabeth Holmes. Anyway, we're going to break this episode down for you in just a moment. But first, folks, a spoiler warning. If you have not seen House of the Dragon episode 8 yet, why have you done this? Why have you clicked this video? You risk spoilers at every turn. With that said, book spoilers will be kept to an absolute minimum, but if you haven't seen the episode yet, leave now and hold your tongue before it's too late.
Say it.
All right, folks, let's get into it. I gotta know, I loved this episode. It was not necessarily as battle heavy or anything like that as previous episodes, but I feel like so much happened here. It's going to really tee up the final 2 episodes of the season. But tell me, what were your impressions overall of this episode? Amy, let's start with you.
Well, yeah, like you said, I don't want to say it was less eventful, but there was less action for sure. That didn't take away from how tense everything was and how deep into the Real Housewives of Westeros we are, and just the family drama. I mean, I just applaud them for being able to write a basically 20-person intermingling. A triangle, I guess, even though it's now a D20, I guess is what we're talking about. But the interfamily dynamics were really, really awesome. And then Viserys, I mean, we've been waiting this entire season to watch him die. And so I guess even though that was sad and stuff, I'm happy that it's done.
I I was curious if the makeup artist could push it even a step further beyond this.
Yes. They hired Sam Raimi to direct this one. This was like a total just Evil Dead. The whole time I was like, how is this not a horror film? Like, we've got body horror. We'll get into all of that, but it did feel a little bit.
We'll talk about the multi-Viserys of madness in a little bit.
Yes.
I think there's a lot to unpack there. But Mikey, what were your overall impressions of this episode?
For the first 60 minutes, I thought it was far and away the best episode of the show so far. And an episode that was so good that it would rank among the best in Game of Thrones' own history. I really felt that strongly. I had trouble rewatching it because I couldn't handle how emotional certain scenes were. You know, it wasn't just Viserys coming in there. When he fell, and there's an entire room of all these people who claim to love him and care for him, and it was his brother, who he has this really complicated and difficult past with, helping him with true tenderness, right? More than probably we've ever seen with Daemon, and putting his throne back on him. I mean, the way that they built to that moment over just 8 episodes was really incredible. And there was so much more. You know, I've said this before. People who've been watching all season know I love these gatherings more than anything. I really love the calm before the storm, where you see the clouds gathering. It was really, really incredible for just about 60 minutes. And then I don't think I could have possibly hated the final scene anymore. I have been trying to calm myself down for days since I saw it for the first time. That's how much I hate the end of this episode, that I've been debating whether or not to say it ruined the entire show going forward. I am on the fence. But I have considered saying that it ruined the show going forward. So it's a mixed bag.
No, I mean, that is a roller coaster of emotions, not unlike what everyone in the episode experienced. But I thought it was a little ham-fisted in how they deployed that final sort of revelation or botched revelation. But wow, series ruining. I guess I can. So, well, maybe what do you want to get into it now, or should we save it for when we talk about that scene in a little more detail? If you're feeling it right now, we can dive right in.
Let's save it. You know why? Because I don't want it to be all negative, and this is going to kind of let's talk about. There's a lot of good stuff to appreciate and admire, and let's focus on that. And I will not have a problem getting reworked up. I promise.
Yeah, let's end on the most heinous of negative notes. Let's do that.
Yeah, like Game of Thrones itself. So let's start off by what worked well for you this episode. What was something that you really liked that this episode did, Amy?
I loved the recasting of Aemond, the eye patch guy.
Yes.
That was incredible. He's one of those people, immediately he comes on screen and you're like, WTF is going to go on with that guy, because you're just drawn to, he has a Daemon quality to him where you're like, danger.
It's just that his name is just Daemon spelled differently. They moved the D to the end.
Yes, exactly. It's the boggle of the Targaryens. They just shook a thing, and that you got to pick, you got to choose. That worked really well. I thought Rhaenyra's and Daemon's relationship, how that has evolved, was awesome. Just in the beginning, when they kind of made the decision to go, that seemed like, wow, these people are kind of have always been, but are now on the same page and actually in a partnership. Mm-hmm. So that was really neat to see. And then just the entire dinner was incredible. I couldn't look away. Pound on the table and make speeches all night long, you silly goofs. I love it.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. The dinner scene for me was far and away like the best sequence in the episode. It was it felt like a one-act play. It was just like so well done, with everyone, like every character kind of has their moment, and even how they frame it. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but I was very impressed with how they handled that. And it was sort of like a nice, like Mikey was saying as well, like that calm before the storm. This is like that false sense of security that like, oh, you know what? Maybe war isn't inevitable. Maybe we can find common cause.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. But Mikey, what about you? What did you think worked really well for you about this episode?
I want to talk a little bit about the moment with the toast to the strong boys. I've been waiting for that. That's one of the best moments in Fire and Blood. It is just, it kind of really lays out that there is not going to be a reconciliation between these two groups of kids. But what followed was even better. You know, the boys fight, and then Daemon comes over, right? And we can see that Aemond One Eye is sort of Daemon with discipline, right? He is the one duty, right? I will do whatever I need to do. I am focused. But he's definitely like Daemon. So Daemon comes over. He pushes his stepson, nephew away. I'm sorry. Yeah, but stepsons too, right?
Yes.
Rhaenyra, yeah, he's their stepdad.
Yeah.
Stepdad uncle.
Rhaenyra's
kid. He's Jason, Lucerys, and Jon. Yeah. So anyway. So he comes over and he calms them down, right? He takes control of them. And then he turns and he doesn't really give a lot away. He just kind of smiles at Aemon. And Aemon's trying to stare him down, but he's the one who blinks. He's the one who turns away and walks away. And you kind of see, like, you can try to be Daemon Targaryen, but unless you're absolutely an agent of chaos and a true lunatic like he is, you're probably not going to win that battle. And this is one of those things where everybody who knows what's happening in the future, and I'm not giving any specific thing away, everyone who knows what's going to happen in the future knows how good that scene is and what the payoff's going to be. And I absolutely loved it. It was just, as usual, they do so much without actually saying anything. Just two people looking at each other as everybody else watches them and waits. That was excellent.
Yeah, this series has done so much with just these kind of very loaded looks in a crowded room, and I think that's like pitch perfect example. We got a bunch of those at the funeral for Laena Velaryon, but this was just like a nice suckling pig on a plate, just delicious to see. But let's start where the episode did back at the beginning. I want to talk about the arrival. When we see Daemon and Rhaenyra arrive at King's Landing, how much has King's Landing changed in the what? Has it been like 10 years or so? Because they said in these sort of after the episode, all the kids now are supposed to be, or I guess like the oldest kids are supposed to be between like 17 and 21. So I guess last week, maybe 5 years, 10 years, somewhere in the 5 to 10 range.
I think she said. I think Rhaenyra said something about 6. That's 6.
Whatever
it was, it's been a long time.
It's changed a lot. What's this? How much has King's Landing changed, and what is the significance of the 7-pointed star and this sort of growing religious influence we see in the city? Mikey, what can you tell us about that?
What we're seeing are the High Towers already kind of overtaking the Iron Throne. Viserys might still sit on it, but they have now, by putting in the 7-star, so the Targaryens and all of the Velaryons, that survive, the few of them, they have their own religions, their own ways, and the 7 is a Westerosi religion that came kind of late, came from the Andals. It's not the religion of the first men. That's the old gods. The 7 are the new gods. To put that over the Iron Throne, which belongs to House Targaryen, is House Hightower saying, this is about us, this is about Westeros, and this is about Old Town. Because even though the High Septon is now based in King's Landing, it used to be based in Old Town. This is one more way that they are saying this belongs to us now. This is passing to House Hightower, and it is passing more to what we believe in and more of what the people in Old Town, which also include the Maesters, want going on here in this continent.
Yeah, it was also crazy to see how, and they kind of reemphasized this in the aftermath, and I sort of like went back and all of these sort of background details were like, some of these more lewd portraits and murals on the wall have been sort of covered up. And even just the subtler touches of like cobwebs on Viserys' model of old Valyria. It's all these little things that signal these sort of shifting tides and who's actually holding the reins of power here in King's Landing. But Amy, what was your takeaway from how much King's Landing has changed when they finally come home again?
Yeah, I really liked in the episode you see in the last 5 minutes, they kind of recap. So the recap did a one-to-one showing of how in the first episode you see it, and it's the girls, and there's this kind of Hobbiton vibe where it's bustling and all the little children are out playing and people are running around, and then you fast forward to what this last episode was, and it's basically a monastery and it's silent. And I think that's what speaks the most. I will say that it also, the High Towers are in power. There's no doubt about it. But there is a part of it where they have even gotten complacent, and you see that too, where they're a little too comfy, and then Rhaenyra and Daemon showing up, and also the petition and the court does shake things up a bit, not to mention Viserys' entrance. But it's like in 6 years, yes, a lot has changed. And somehow they still have also kind of relaxed into it and just are like biding their time until it's time. So I loved seeing just, yeah, we're like we out here kind of vibe, but no real movement happening. Just the still, again, the calm before the storm, but just how still King's Landing is compared to what it used to be.
Yeah, it was just unsettling. And it's like, how can I put my finger on this? Oh, right. It is so dark in here and dreary in a way that, like, it was always like dark. It was like a castle. So it's not going to be like brightly lit per se, but you really feel it when they're walking through after they got that very paltry meeting that befits their station, according to Otto Hightower. You get this sort of like calcified arrogance from everyone on the Green side, on the Hightower side. And that really comes through in the small council meeting you see with Lord Beesbury trying to do his job and everyone being like, oh my God, Beesbury, wrap it up, buddy. Nobody freaking cares. So what were your thoughts on, like, I guess, what were your thoughts on that small council meeting and Otto and sort of this sort of smugness that sort of like blanketed the city, Mikey?
His arrogance is on full display. We talk about the smart people don't tip their hands, right? The people who play the Game of Thrones well, they don't tip their hands. When you're not having anybody welcome the heir to the Iron Throne and the king's daughter, you're just snubbing her and you're making sure it's clear as day what you're doing. Your arrogance is out of control, and you're basically letting them know you have no power here. You're not going to have any power here. We're in charge. How does that benefit you? It doesn't. Just put up appearances until you're ready to not put up appearances. I do like that Otto Hightower did that, though, because I would hate for anybody to forget how horrible he is, that he's just completely like, I want these terrible people to keep doing terrible things so that everybody can remember they are terrible. Let's not lose focus, people. Let's not lose focus. Otto Hightower is one of the worst people to ever live in Westeros.
No, it's truly his the bitch is back moment. No one does it like Otto, and he just the rudest possible move, just sending poor Lord Caswell like running outside being like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize you guys were here. Our ring isn't working. Oh my God, right this way. But I do want to shift gears a little bit to talk about one of the other worst people in the castle, and that is Aegon, who's definitely throwing his hat in the ring for being a giant sack of crap, one of the worst people on the show. Thoughts on sort of like the power dynamics and everything that plays out with Alicent, Aegon, and that poor serving girl, Diana. Amy, what were your thoughts on how this sequence sort of played out?
Yeah, it's gnarly. I'll tell you that, for one word. It's not a pretty scene. But I think what the most that we get out of it is Alicent's how she's playing the game. She's playing it she's playing it one way with the servant girl, with her son. She's putting up appearances, and then she also knows that this guy could inherit. So, but meanwhile, she's like, "You're no son of mine." So I just don't know. Like I'm left in uncertainty in the gray area where, like, what is going to happen to him? Because in my head, I mean, and then she hugs her daughter. So it's like, she wants her children on the throne, but she hates her children. At least Aegon. We don't really know how she feels about Aemon, but I think if I were her, I would want Aemond to be the heir and not Aegon. Aegon's just a little bitch. So I don't know. The whole scene was really interesting, but I actually really sympathize with actually for Alicent, because it's between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah. It's a really tough but effective scene, I think, like you said, in terms of how it illustrates how Alicent has evolved and how she is playing the Game of Thrones. And it's one of the rare instances for Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon where I think they gain more by what they don't show. This has been a series where they don't shy away from acts of brutality, violence, sexual violence, etc. But in this case, just the implication, the understanding of what happened became more powerful because you see the aftermath and you see how it's the shift when Alicent is being warm and comforting and then hedging her bets by giving her the same moon tea that we saw Rhaenyra drink earlier in the season. And it's just, and she slaps him because she's doing this ostensibly for her son. And seeing this little be so feckless and just feckless and reckless, that should be the Targaryen house motto for I'd say a good 95% of them, because there's out there partying and not. Then he has the audacity to kind of be like, you don't understand how hard it is for me, the wealthiest person in Westeros, to have to be in this castle all day.
I'll never be enough for you. I just want my parents to be proud of me anyway. I'm gonna go do this I'm gonna go commit this crime.
Yes, I'm gonna be a criminal. Mikey, what were your thoughts on this sequence and this scene and how it plays into the larger tapestry of the episode?
I think there are three big takeaways. One is that they're not just making Aegon unlikable. He's kind of described in Fire and Blood as being charming, but he's also down at Flea Bottom, scumming it up. And, this is different. He's a rapist. There's not going to be any room here to kind of see his point of view. And it makes his little whine to his mother about, it's not good enough. I try everything. No, you don't. No, you don't. You're a bad person. You're a criminal. And nothing good deserves to happen to you, someone who ostensibly might take the Iron Throne. The second is that we see Alicent. I've saw people debating, did Alicent have Diana killed? Was she being sincere? I don't think it matters, right? She tried to do something terrible in the nicest way. How good is that, right? She's trying to protect her son by making this girl think that she's protecting her. It's pretty despicable, even if we can understand why she's doing it. But the third takeaway is something else we've talked about a lot this season. There are no secrets. There are no secrets. This gets out immediately, and it gets out to somebody that Alicent and the High Towers most certainly would not want to know this information. Mysaria, the White Worm. You cannot, if something happens in King's Landing, you have to assume somebody's going to find out about it. And I think it's something that gets overlooked by a lot of these people in these situations. Because maybe if Alicent thought that through, maybe she really would kill Diana. I don't think she did. I don't think she's quite that evil. But who knows? Maybe sometimes you need to be evil just to survive.
Well, you saying that makes me think, because we didn't see Larys at all this episode, and he was a big player for a minute. But we did see him in the in the preview for next episode. So do you think that's how he's coming into play? I can't imagine it would be that. I don't know that anyone would be like, oh no, Aegon's out there raping people. I think everyone knows that.
I think with Larys, at least, I feel like, he kind of teed up previously on the ride back from the funeral, hey, if, I would have gotten you that child's eye if you'd asked me to. And just so you know, there's no line I won't cross.
Oh my gosh.
I'm your nuclear option. So if you ever need me,
do you think he's going to kill Aegon?
I don't think he's going to kill Aegon, because that wouldn't benefit her. I think that she's going to deploy him against Rhaenyra and her side in the next episode, because the way this ends, I feel like it's sort of teeing up, you get that false sense of it's so good to have you back. We used to be friends. We can be friends again. Wait a minute. The who that was promised? My Aegon?
Oh my god!
And we'll get to that. But I do think that's how he's going to come back into play as some sort of. I think that some schemes are going to be a hatching after this week, But speaking of schemes, let's talk about the biggest scheme of all this episode, and that is Vaemond Velaryon, the schemer-in-chief teaming up with Alicent and Otto to try and seize the throne of Driftmark for himself. Mikey, what were your thoughts on how Vaemond comported himself this episode?
Good riddance to an underdeveloped character who was not likable really in any way. The show's done a great job giving us characterization in a very short time. What did we really know about him? He didn't like Daemon. He was kind of looking out for himself. He didn't respect anybody else. Very happy to see him lose the top of his head. It is interesting, so there's a minor change here. He is Corlys's younger brother on the show. In the book, he's his nephew, and he has his own kids. And after this, this is slightly changed, but for the most part, after this accusation, Viserys also takes all of Vaemond's kids' tongues. So this is even, like, if you think it's bad just watching him lose his head right there, like, he causes his family to lose their tongues too. It was interesting, though, to finally see somebody say this thing that everybody's been dancing around. The closest we got was a private conversation between Alicent and Viserys, where even she got like 85% of the way there. She could not really say it. And that's why you see this anticipation. Daemon's gone. Whatever. It's fine. I don't care, right? Whatever. Goodbye. I thought Daemon had a great line. He can keep his tongue the way he sliced it off, and you saw it. What was really good there, though, and I know I'm going to keep coming back to this, go back and watch Aemon One-Eye's reaction when Daemon does it. It's a little bit like, yep, you do what you gotta do. I respect it.
He's like, that was pretty cool. Valyrian steel makes a clean cut.
Yeah. So, and this is why I say, it's you can get so much on the first viewings, but you're taking all these big moments in. That's why I think that, just like Game of Thrones, the show is really good for multiple viewings, because then you get kind of those little moments where you're not shocked by what happened. You can take in more of the details and go back and watch you talk about the looks. There's at one point Alicent is like, oh no, I thought I wanted this to happen. I do not want to. This is going to be bad. Nothing good is going to come from this. So careful what you wish for. And it's really just really well done. It's so good.
When Daemon is just like, go ahead, say it, see what happens.
Go ahead.
It was so well done. For everyone in this show, for the most part, has been sort of whispering the quiet part. And he very literally said the quiet part as loud as humanly possible. He yelled it and then insults Rhaenyra in front of the king, the way he was talking. He was already in danger the way he was talking back to the king, but that was just, that he's going to die in that moment. But the way that it happened, like, it was so much more shocking, I think, than the way it plays out in the book, although you don't have that moment of his kids also paying the iron price. But I think it was very effective in just sort of how shocking it was. I even said, oh, and scared my dog when I was watching. So it's a very, very well done. But I also want to talk about one of my other favorite moments. What were your thoughts on the arrival of Viserys in this chamber in his sweet-ass mask, Amy?
Yeah. I do want to comment. One other thing is that the last two episodes and this episode, we're hearing chicken about, or everyone's playing chicken about the bastards. And by my count, Aemond is the only one immune. Like, I guess he got an eye shut, but he has literally called the boys bastards. Mm-hmm. And then he did it again to this time. And this is directly after he saw Vaemond lose his head. So I think, he's definitely playing with fire, but I think he's got this, and he's correct every time he's said it. He's gotten a pretty much zero punishment. Definitely not death, but I just want to put that out there, that there's some immunity here. Like, some people get to say bastards and some people don't get to say it. And Aemond is one who has now done it twice.
He got in sort of under the wire, and I think they probably feel like he lost an eye. That's probably punishment enough.
Yes.
I'm not gonna cut out my own son's tongue just yet. He just lost an eye. This week he says it, but he doesn't, and he's also strategic about it.
Right.
He waits till dad's gone to bed, and he does it through just very loaded illusion where he could plead plausible deniability, even though everyone knows exactly what he's saying.
Yes, he's gotten a little smarter, but I'm interested to see how far he takes this because he's shown twice that he's fairly immune
Yeah.
to punishment for that.
Well, it
Now,
seems
yeah,
he
go ahead.
he played his cards right. I think, like especially
Yes,
now, R.I.P. King. Now that Viserys is gone,
we'll see.
he's his stocks are only going to go up from here. But let's get back to Viserys. What were your
Yes.
thoughts on his arrival in that Phantom of the Opera mask with the tentacle across it?
Not, I mean, come on, that's yeah, super dope. I mean, when I didn't expect, oh my God, I just, again, it just is like, it just feels like Sam Raimi when it's just like this, now you see the innards of a mouth and a jaw working
Mm-hmm.
and the teeth and the gaps and the eye, like, I mean, it's hard to look away from that, but his entrance into that scene, well timed, and also, I mean, like you called it out just in the off joke to me, but it's just this. I love how coherent he is in going, I guess we're solving this again. Like that was just so dope. And he's like, why are we doing this again? And just the way he shows up. And I love Otto's and Alicent's looks to each other like, dang it, man, this wasn't supposed to happen. So he interrupts everything. It's a really choice moment. Yeah, arguably it shouldn't have happened. They already decided all of this, but everyone, like it has been through history, when everyone's uncertain, we need to just nail it down one more time, and he was able to do that. But it was great to see like Rhaenyra kind of get a notch on the board there.
Yeah, it was also a nice parallel to what we've seen earlier this season, where we constantly see Viserys being the one who's interrupted during his big moments of pomp and circumstance, and then to have him be the one to sort of have the door thrown open and the slow, deliberate, just because that's as fast as he can go. Like, this is a man who is actively falling apart, but he still pulls it together to reassert that he is not he's not to be overlooked. Like, he's been trifled with for too long.
The announcements of all of his names, like he got the full rollout there. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was just such a powerful moment, and like Mikey mentioned earlier, that moment as well where Daemon is the one he won't accept help from anyone, but finally Daemon comes to his side and helps him up those last few steps and recrowns his brother after they've been sort of squabbling back and forth for so long. It was so well done. Mikey, what were your thoughts on this?
I love the history. I love the lore of the story. It's what I grab onto. But the reason I got invested in A Song of Ice and Fire, and the reason I get invested in the history so much, is because I'm really invested in the characters. You know, I have a tendency, the nerdiest thing I do is I tend to start talking about these characters like they're real historical figures. If you're ever around me and you hear me start ranting about one of these, you would think I was talking about actual kings and queens and princesses. And it's embarrassing, but for me, it's all worth it for last night's episode for the first 60 minutes because we see Viserys is he's ruled over peace in Westeros, right? He's continued King Jaehaerys's reign of making the realm a better place, but we know that his shortcomings as a ruler are going to lead to war, right? But he's a really good person, and we can feel bad for him as a person. And here, his daughter, who he loves, I would say more than anybody, comes to him and says, like, they're coming after us. They're coming after me. And he finds the strength and the courage to get up. And in some ways, I don't think it's embarrassing for him, but it is embarrassing for any ruler to look weak. And here he is. He's decrepit. His face is covered for reasons they don't even know how bad it is. But he comes out to do the right thing, and it's really emotional. And the same thing happens during his dinner. Here is a man who is desperate for one thing, right? He was talking earlier, what's my legacy going to be? And here in his final day, he doesn't care about his legacy in terms of how the history books remember. He cares about his legacy and making sure that his family is strong. And he has this wonderful, beautiful moment, and it's just great storytelling. It's great storytelling from George R. R. Martin. It's great storytelling from the people who are making House of the Dragon. And it makes all of this other stuff that I care about and I talk about and we get into, it makes it worth it because of how emotional it is. Without that connection, the other stuff wouldn't matter. And I just want everybody to remember I said this stuff before we get to the other stuff later.
really hedging your bets. No, I agree. I think that this has a lot of really well-earned emotional payoffs, which is saying something considering how much the show has kind of jumped around in the timeline. And that, I think, for a lot of folks has been a bit of a sticking point. But I think, to use the same verbiage, they really stuck the landing here in a way that I think was very effective and very reminded me why I love this series so much and just loved the world of Game of Thrones for so many years. I also got to give a shout out to Princess Rhaenys for being, again, the smartest person in the Seven Kingdoms and beyond, for how she expertly, you think that she's going to leave Rhaenyra on red, but then I think when Viserys comes in, she's like, oh, okay, this is going to go her way, so I may as well get something for me as well. What were your thoughts on Rhaenys stepping up and being like, and she also promised to marry her kids to my grandkids? Amy, what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's the equivalent. I mean, it's just the equivalent of like a kid whispering to another kid going, I think it's, and then the other kid going, it's like this, it's like, oh my God, that, okay, I guess I could have just said that out loud. But that it was just, you're right. What I love about this, episode is the characters, but also the cause and effect. Like if Viserys hadn't gone into the throne, Rhaenys wouldn't have said that. If, there's just some dominoes that you can't help but watch fall, and it happens instantly, right? So Viserys even says, this is ridiculous. Rhaenys, what do you think? You're the wife. What do you, and she's like, oh, I guess it's my turn to speak. Yep. Well, then, let's really nail this down in front of everybody. So we all know. And I just, she's just so cool and composed when she's watching Vaemond be, I guess, entombed. She's just, well, actually, I didn't know what that meant. The stranger is, I knew it was like a reference, but I didn't, Mikey, like I knew that it's important, and I know the stranger is one of the gods, but like, what does that mean? Because she doesn't believe in the stranger, right? Or yeah, I don't know. There was something there that I'm like, I think I'm missing something. I don't know why. Do you mind if we just do a tangent to that? Okay.
No. So the stranger is the seventh of the seven gods that, the 7-pointed star, the seven. The stranger is basically the god of death. He is there's 3 male gods, 3 female gods, and then there's the stranger. The stranger is also, like, if you go to the House of Black and White in Bravos, you'll find a statue of the stranger and not the other ones, because they think the many-faced god is just one god. So all these different gods are just one god. It's the god of death. So when she's saying that, she's being like, I don't care about my brother-in-law's body. I've lost so much before this that death doesn't bother me. I'm not hiding from the stranger because he's never hid from me. And it's really sad. It's really sad. It's powerful. And as usual, it just shows that she is probably better than literally everybody else.
Yeah, she's numb, but she's still stacking her own deck, which is great.
Yeah, it is nice to see that even in the face of sort of tragedy, she can still be this smooth operator. And she's known what the score is from day one. She's always seen the writing on the wall. And unfortunately, it's had a really grisly body count for her and her family. So hopefully this will hedge her bets in a positive direction. But before we sort of talk about what the future may hold, I do want to talk about, I think what I would argue is the centerpiece of this episode, and that is the dinner party. I wrote in this script it's the world's most uncomfortable dinner party, but it's no more uncomfortable, I guess, than like any sort of extended family gathering where there's a bit of history there. But I want to talk about, for me, something that really stood out was how it was staged. I thought there was a really excellent visual tableau they created that was sort of loaded with this symbolism. You have Viserys in the middle. His masked side is towards Alicent in the green, sort of that artifice that he puts on for the people, and sort of this this layer of sort of not truthfulness that goes on there. And his unmasked side is toward Rhaenyra and the Blacks, and sort of that faction of the family where these are his blood. These are the people that know him for who he is, the real Viserys, as it were. And then he goes mask off during his big speech, and you see the true Viserys. He's rotting from the inside out. Like he says, the House of the Dragon is rotting from the inside out. So I might be projecting too much onto this, but I thought it was so effective from a visual standpoint and how loaded that was. But I want to know, what were your thoughts on how this dinner party played out, Mikey?
I always tend to think when you are watching something or reading something that's being well written, that all of that stuff's intentional. The seating the greens on the side of the mask and seating, Rhaenyra on her side, the blacks on the side where he's not covered up. I think that's intentional. But even if it's not, it's a testament to the show so far that we're seeing symbolism there, that we're engaging it, we're finding it. As for the removal of the mask, talk about an effective reveal, right? Because we know it's not good. We've seen, but we don't know he's going to be missing an eye. We don't know he's Harvey Dent, we don't know how bad it is. And it's so effective because it's not a reveal for the sake of a reveal. There is both characterization and plot in it. He has a real purpose for this. I want you to see me as I am, not as a king, not as the holder of the seat, but as a man who loves you. And I love all of you, and I want you to get along. I want you to be safe. It's really masterful storytelling. And, Dan, one advantage to doing this show every week, there's some disadvantages, which is if I say something stupid, it's on the internet. I can't, it's there. People can be like, hey, dummy, remember when you said that after episode 3, or you were wrong about this? One thing I have really nailed is how good Paddy Considine has been.
Oh my God.
We need to talk about him more because, there's sometimes you just see performances where you're like, oh, if you want to teach someone acting, just let them watch this. And it was that good. He's just incredible from start to finish. Absolutely incredible. And that scene, as well as it's written, as well as it's staged, it only gets to that special level because he's that good.
The way he delivers that monologue, the way he is through this entire episode, because he has to play so many different shades. If anyone has ever had the unfortunate situation of having a family member or loved one be in hospice and seeing how hard it is trying to manage lucidity versus pain and having these weird moments of clarity amidst sort of like a sea of like this sort of like fogginess, he nailed that so expertly in a way that was like really touching and thoughtful and well done. And just seeing all the rich shades he brought to this character that really don't come through, I would say, in the book. Like this he is like, it's like definitive. Like this is like, enhances the experience of reading the book, knowing that this is sort of the intention of who Viserys should be. And I really think that he deserves an Emmy nomination at the bare minimum for his work, especially in this episode. I would say like the clip of him at dinner is what I would say they should submit for the Emmy, just because his performance was so well done. But Amy, what were your thoughts on Paddy, on the dinner party? What worked for you?
Yeah. Well, you risk a dialogue heavy scene with most of the action being we sit around a table, and I know this from having tried to shoot many a Dungeons and Dragons narrative web series, etc. So it's always going to that's just generally a risk, even theatrically on film, no matter the medium. When the action is sit around a table and have dinner, you're gonna need to buff up the characterizations and the relationships, and thankfully not only the dialogue does it, but the relationships. And it's like it was expertly placed because this wasn't as if we were just doing this in episode 2 or 3. Like we all have history with these characters, and we're just waiting to see like, okay, like I said, like the dominoes falling and the cause and effect of what everyone's doing. So, really, really no notes. It does. I love that it does go a little haywire once he leaves, but for a moment, the character of Viserys is just, I think hope is one of the most painful emotions, right? Because hope is always despite something. And for Viserys, it's despite everything he's hopeful. And it's just like, oh my God. And so his pain and his hope coming through is pretty magical, and it culminating in kind of everyone, at least at least for minutes, they really believe in it too. And they're like, actually though, and Rhaenyra making the first move, like, what a queen move. And I mean, to Alicent, like her taking up the toast, and then all the toasts that follow, you're like, wait a, I mean, it's Game of Thrones, so you're never like, oh, this is happy ending, a nice Hollywood happy ending. But for a time, you do get that moment where you're like, I have hope, just like Viserys, and you're back in Steven Spielberg land as a kid again, and going, wait, maybe we all could get along.
But wait, there's more.
There's more.
It is. I thought it was really well done. The way you have immediately Rhaenyra sort of like, she's really touched by what her father says and like swallows her own pride. Like that can't have been easy considering how prideful everyone in this room is. And seeing that, I really loved the sort of pseudo reconciliation that you get between Rhaenyra and Alicent, because, they talk about this scene in Fire and Blood, and it is kind of this sort of like, it's like one last night of like general pleasantries, and like, there were some awkward moments, but ultimately it was a pretty good time for everyone involved. But I think this does a better job at highlighting the kind of sour note it ends on. Like, you have the older generation, at least with Rhaenyra and Alicent, being like, we were friends once, we can be friends again. But the kids who have just grown up in this sort of familial Cold War, they can't. They don't get it. They're still these just like, again, these feckless, reckless youths. And, you see Jace trying to be like noble about it, but then even he is like very pointedly like, well, clearly your wife hates you, so I'm going to go dance with her in front of you. Like you're talking a big game about your sexual prowess and like what an alpha male you are, but you can't, like, your wife is clearly miserable, so I'm going to go dance with her in front of everybody. Yes?
Hold on, I gotta defend Jace. I think that was actually a sincere gesture as a show of good faith in front of his grandfather. I think what we saw of Jace in this episode, that he takes being the heir to the Iron Throne seriously, that when his cousin, his uncle Aegon insults him, he composes himself, right? Composes himself, and he gives a sincere toast. I know we haven't seen each other, but I hope we'll be friends and allies. So I'm going to defend Jace there.
Oh, I still
definitely a Jace apologist, 100%.
I still think that Jace came out on top. He has more moral high ground, but I still took that as a very pointed, like thumbing of the nose at Aegon, because he had just been sitting there and taking all of these very extremely lewd, rude comments. And he's like, look, I'm mind if I cut in? Okay, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. That's what I thought. And it's very much showing that he's like all talk and like no follow through.
Wait, I'm sorry. I'm a little bit confused because Jace is dancing with Aegon's wife. I thought that was
which
Aegon's
is his sister. Yes,
what?
His sister wife.
You're correct, Amy. It's House Targaryen.
Oh, wait, but that already happened? That just happened?
So they allude to the fact that they are getting married during the funeral episode, when Aegon's complaining that he has to marry his weird sister Helena, who's just spouting off prophecies and playing with bugs. And Aemond is like, I would marry my sister in a heartbeat if it meant I could be the good boy of the family. Duty first. And Aegon still clearly, and that's what makes the Diana scene even like brutal as well on a different level, apart from just the abject disgustingness of it, is that he's also like fooling around on his wife and ignoring her and just drinking all the time, as she mentions. And like, she's just, I don't think that Helena really cares about Aegon to begin with, but like, she's in this situation, so she wants dignity and respect like anyone else would. But yeah, they are in fact brother and sister, but also husband and wife.
Got it.
Yes, they like to keep it in the family in the Targaryen on the Targaryen side. But speaking of Helena, what do you make of her "beware the beast beneath the boards" comment, Mikey? What do you have any thoughts on this?
Anybody who's familiar with the world of George R. R. Martin knows that anytime you try to predict prophecy, it really comes back to bite you. But if that is foreshadowing the moment I think it is, I can't wait in the future to come back and talk about it, because of everything that's going to happen. I think it might be foreshadowing the one that I think will literally send people into a tizzy. So I can't tell you what it specifically is.
Oh
But if it's what I think it is,
without giving anything away, does this involve my favorite recurring motif in a sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. No spoilers. All right. That's, man, I do think this is going to be yet another instance of Helena being the low key dreamer of the family, the seer, just spouting off like prophetic things that are going to happen. But buckle up, everybody, because I think even from if you've watched the preview for next week, stuff is about to get absolutely hog wild in King's Landing. But let's move on from potential spoiler country, and let's move on to. Was there anything else we want to talk about for the dinner party? Because I want to talk about the final scene we get where Viserys shuffles off this mortal coil. And I definitely want to get to Mikey's thoughts on it. But first, Amy, what were your thoughts on Viserys's death and how Alicent misinterprets his ramblings about Aegon's dream, the Song of Ice and Fire?
Yeah, okay. So I'm very interested to see why Mikey hates it. Jesus. But there's like, I get that it's a little ham-fisted in that there's a bit of like an old Hollywood or vaudevillian, slip of the wait, you said, farce in terms of dialogue. Fine. But it doesn't bother me because, that's what prophecies are. And it's just like a well-timed, I don't know. It felt very in line with how we're doing prophecies. And we're still, I remember in Game of Thrones, we were still like, wait, is it Jon Snow, the prince who was promised? No, it was Daenerys, fans of the show are always invested in who the prince that was promised is, and I guess will be for the next 250 years in the world. And so for the characters to be equally invested and equally confused, it doesn't bother me, I guess. And for her to take that and go, oh, that means my son. It's like, well, that was always going to happen. We were like, everyone is waiting for the loophole where they're like, that means it's me or my child. Like everyone is waiting for that one bit of permission. So as far as apologists go, this is me setting it up to go, it wasn't that bad, Mikey, no matter what you're about to say. So that's what I think. And then just like watching a death is, he did an amazing, how do you act that? But it was very poignant. And the hand reaching up was just quite a tableau. I don't know. It meant something, and I'm not sure what, but it made me feel things. So I thought it was expert. It ended so quietly,
Yeah.
So
with just him like exhaling my love, reaching probably towards Emma, who he's been separated from for so long. And yeah, it was very well done. Shout out to the sound designers for this episode with the like sort of rattling croak of his breath that you get every time his like rib cage rises and falls.
Well, also the choice of cinematography where you're seeing like a tear and a hand as opposed to every time you see him, you see his jaw tendons. Like that would have taken you out of it, I think. So it was sweet and poignant in a way that was also, a dying man, which is not sweet and poignant, or it's definitely not sweet. So it was still adorable Patty, which I think he's just the most gummy bear of people in the whole world.
Well, I'm gonna shift away from the gummy bear. He was definitely very gummy by the end. I want to circle back so we can tee up Mikey for this. I do think that and maybe this is what he's going to lean into. I think that we know there's going to be this sort of civil war regardless. We don't need her overhearing what she assumes is a prophecy for why she should be like at odds with Rhaenyra again. Just give it 5 minutes. Someone's going to say something that offends the other. They will naturally be at odds again. I don't know if you need this sort of larger, like, no, it was my son who was prophesied. But I'm not mad at it. I'm just like, okay, like I'll forgive a little clunk after this like excellent episode. But Mikey, the microphone is yours. What about this scene spoke to you?
Dan, before I start, I was thinking about this. Would you say it's safe to say that I have either liked or defended about 95% of the changes from the book?
Yes, I would say you have largely been in favor of this adaptation.
Okay. What are they thinking? What are they thinking? Okay, all right. All right, I'll stay calm. I got to stay calm. I got to get this out. The introduction of Aegon's dream, right, of his A Song of Ice and Fire, was great. It reframed Rhaenyra's story. It made, I'm not giving anything away. This is a show about a war of secession. We know there's a war coming. If you don't know that, I don't know what you've been doing. I don't want to hear complaints. We know there's a war coming. It made Rhaenyra more sympathetic, but also less sympathetic, because every decision she made, it wasn't just selfish because it hurt her own claim. It was selfish because she has a responsibility that goes well beyond her claim. She has the responsibility. Her father has given her the greatest secret in the world, the entire reason her family came to Westeros. So every time she does something stupid or selfish, it's less defensible. So it's great. It makes her more sympathetic. It makes her more complex, but it also makes her less defensible. Great stuff, right? Great stuff. By making Alicent think that this was his wish, it has now absolved her of everything she is about to do. Alicent's story so far in The Fire and Blood, the reason Alicent's story is interesting is because she makes her own choices for her own reasons, and then she has to live with the consequences. So when she spends all of these years scheming and showing ambition and planning to put her son on the Iron Throne over who her husband wanted and named, she is responsible for that. Good or bad, we don't need every character to be sympathetic. We don't. That's not an interesting story. Game of Thrones was not interesting because every character was sympathetic. Now she has an out. For everything she does when we're watching it, we're going to say, well, had there not been the confusion on Viserys' deathbed, she might not have done this. Oh, how sad. It's all a tragic accident now. It takes away agency from her. It makes her less interesting. It makes the story that is about to come less interesting because instead of two women making their own choices for their own reasons, it is an unfortunate mistake. And that is not an interesting story. That is not a tragedy. That is not even that. I guess it's a drama, but it just takes away what works about Alicent's story. Because now we're just going to be sitting there, and every time she does something, we're going to be thinking in the back of the head, poor Alicent, she wouldn't have done that otherwise. I really think that this is a disastrous decision. I really think it's that bad. What they had done with Aegon's dream was so good. So good. It had immediate ramifications for the show. It made it more interesting for book readers and for people who don't know the story at all. And then they just went ahead and they completely undid all of that. So yeah, I really think, I might calm down eventually and say, well, they didn't ruin the show. I just don't like this change. But I do think that they might have ruined Alicent's story. I think at minimum, they made it way less interesting.
See, I think that is an incredibly fair critique. I agree. I think it definitely diminishes her story up to this point. And I know from the preview that that this prophecy will at least be invoked at least once next week. But I'm hoping that they kind of limit it. I'm hoping it's like, hey, we're going to mention that and then kind of move on. And then she can keep going back to making her own choices, because I agree. I definitely want to see her, as we've seen in this episode, even her becoming this smoother operator of her own accord, like having to navigate like abjectly challenging like situations where no one comes out looking good, and just dealing with all of these complex negotiations and relationships. I want to see more of that going forward. So hopefully this will just be more of a speed bump than sort of a like bridge out ahead situation.
And Dan, what precedes that moment makes that moment even worse, right? Because she sees her son is not fit for the Iron Throne. It's just not. She sees that her husband desperately, he used his final moments. He didn't take milk of the poppy. He dragged himself out. He was desperate to ensure not even necessarily that his family got along, but that they were safe. Because he can see if you're split, you're going to fall apart. The house of the dragon cannot be divided, right? So it sets her up as if to say, Alicent was on the verge of seeing the error of her ways. Oh, poor Alicent. It makes it worse. All of that made it even worse, because like you said, right? Maybe it's just one episode they'll mention it, right, and then they'll ignore it. It's still going to be there. It's still going to be there, and it's going to shadow and reframe everything she does. And it's just not as good.
Well, that is definitely something that I think we're going to have to see how it plays out next week. We're going to have to sit with it for a little bit because it's definitely giving me food for thought for how I'm going to think about this as we go into the next episode. Because, yeah, I got to say, when I saw that little bit in the teaser, I was like, come on, like you just have this, just internalize this. We remember, we were there, we saw this. But yeah. We're sort of nearing our time, so I kind of want to wrap things up a little bit. But with that in mind, who is your MVP for this episode, Amy?
Oh, I mean, so many good ones. Damon for the tongue, and then Aemon for getting away with it once again. Those are my two.
Yeah, it's the actor they have playing Aemond. I love this guy they chose because he looks like Kirkland brand Matt Smith, but it was just with like the blonde wig and everything, the long hair, it's just all of this stuff.
Yes.
In terms of my MVP, I might be going for the low hanging fruit here, but he was just a king doing king shit this episode. I got to give it up to Viserys. Just masterclass in acting from Paddy Considine, and just so many seismic moments that happen here as a result of him and his conversations and everything he says. So I think he really stole the show for me, and I think at least he got to leave this earth with a semblance of peace after having so much upheaval in the final years of his life. Mikey, what about you? Who's your MVP?
Technically, I'm going to break the rules by saying Paddy Considine, not even a character. I just think Paddy Considine's the MVP. But for all the reasons we talked about, we don't have to rehash them. But I do want to give a special shout out to Helena Targaryen, who is hilarious. Did that work? No,
I'll allow it.
Okay. She is, not only is she a little prophetess, she is hilarious and lovable, and I hope no harm ever comes to her.
Well, it's Game of Thrones, so I'm sure it'll end totally fine for her. Are there any other moments or Easter eggs or little details that we want to point out that people might have missed? We saw that literal Easter eggs in the form of the 3 dragon eggs that were in the clutch from Syrax. And also my favorites, we got to see, or at least we got to see half of the twinly duo of Eric and Eric. Mikey, what can you tell us about them?
They are identical twins who have nearly identical names because apparently everyone in Westeros is really lazy about naming children. Mm-hmm. I'm thrilled they're involved. And all I will say is when a character is getting FaceTime and they're getting named, pay attention. And that goes even beyond them. Even these characters, if a character shows up and you hear them, someone say their name, pay attention because it's going to have a payoff. As for finding more dragon eggs, I'm curious to see if this show is going to give us a definitive answer over where Daenerys' 3 eggs came from. So there's some thought that they all come from Dreamfire, who we believe we saw in the Dragon Pit, but haven't really heard named proper. Mm-hmm. But the show is kind of, doing its own thing in certain ways. So I'm curious to see if we find out where her eggs come from.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dreamfire is Helena's dragon in the book?
Yeah, they just haven't named that. Okay. They haven't shown her. So, but yeah, I'm curious to see where that comes from.
Awesome. Amy, any other moments that stood out to you that you wanted to mention before we depart?
Gosh, I think we got it all covered. So I'm going to go none off the top of my head. And so I'll go with no.
All right. That is an acceptable answer as well because we are out of time.
Okay.
Yes, the perfect answer, in fact. Folks, we'll be back next week with another breakdown of House of the Dragon, but if you want to dive even deeper into this episode in the meantime, guess what? We've got you covered over on Nerdist.com. So a big thank you to everyone who tuned in and joined us, and a huge thank you to my guests. Amy, where can people find you on the World Wide Web?
I'm at Vorpahl Sword on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch.
Amazing. And Mikey, where can people find you?
If you want to tell me how much you hate Sir Kristen Cole, because I want to hear it, find me on Twitter at Burger Mike, and you can also read my thoughts about why I hated the end of the episode at the best website anybody ever created anywhere, Nerdist.com.
All right, folks, thank you so much. Thank you again for tuning in. But in the meantime, tell us, because we want to know, what do you think? What do you think of this episode? Who is your MVP? What was your favorite moment? Let us know in the comments below. And for the latest and greatest in the world of pop culture, make sure you stay tuned to Nerdist.com.